So we're issuing stock for, or in non-cash transactions. What we've done before is we issue stock, we get cash. Now we issue stock, we're not getting cash. We're getting something that is not cash. What would be something we would get that's not cash? And this is particularly true for startup companies. They don't have, probably much cash because they're just starting up. So maybe they're issuing stock to get the equipment they need or some planned assets. They could be issuing stock to cover the legal fees to organize the company, or for land. So anything that is not cash, but we're issuing stock in payment for it. So the trick is that you have to come up with a proper valuation for this non-cash asset, because it's not cash. You have to figure out what's it worth. And sometimes that's not always clear. The board of directors are generally authorized to set the price in non-cash transactions, and this can lead to, you just call it shenanigans or fraud, or call it what you want, but say you had a building worth $100,000, and the board of directors assigned it a value of $200,000. Okay, it's worth $100,000 if you had a similar building, but they say, oh, we'll just say it's $200,000. That essentially waters the stock. So this is overvaluing the asset, and that's supposed to be water, and it's just watering the stock. Alternatively, they could set the price too low, and that would mean that they've actually got more assets than they're showing on their balance sheet. And so that would be a situation where they'd have sort of created what's called secret reserves. Okay, so these things, not okay. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to do this. You're supposed to record non-cash items at the fair value in an arm's length transaction and all of that good stuff, at the fair value of the non-cash consideration received in the transaction, or given up, whichever one is more clearly determinable or evident. Okay? So say a company issues 3,000 shares of $5 par value stock for land. Okay, so we happen to know we've got a solid appraisal on the land. The land is worth $31,000. Okay, so this is a value that we can use. Okay, it is the fair value of the land. So when we were making the journal entry for this, we would simply go, okay, land, and we have the fair value is $31,000, and we would do our common stock, and common stock would be the number of shares issued times the par value, which would be 15,000, and then we would have paid in capital in excess of par value on our common stock of the difference, which would be 16,000. Okay, so that would be an instance where we knew the fair value of what we were receiving, and perhaps the stock was not actively traded. If the problem is stated differently, and it says, you will usually have the phrase actively traded stock as opposed to closely held. So the company issues 3,000 shares of $5 par stock, same as above, for land, and we don't know the value of the land. We can't get a decent appraisal on it, but the stock is actively traded and it has a market price of $10 a share. So in this case, what do? Well, we're still getting the land, but the value of the land now is going to be the 3,000 shares times that $10. So that comes out to $30,000. And the common stock would be the 3,000 shares we issued times the par value of 15,000, and we got paid in capital in excess of par on our common stock of the difference, which is also 15,000. Okay, so this is the basic rule you need to remember on that, and these are sort of the two different situations that can happen. Okay, the last item in this chapter is simply the costs of issuing stock, or not in this chapter, but in this section. And so stock issue costs they're considered to be a cost of financing, and they simply reduce the proceeds. This is the proceeds here, so if there were stock issue costs, it would simply reduce that. And so if you look at the example I gave in the book, we've got a company that, I'm not gonna write this all out. You've got a company that issues 2,000 shares of its $10 par common stock for $60,000, but there were 1,500 of costs associated with issuing the stock, underwriting costs, all that good stuff. So you'll notice in the journal entry that the cash proceeds come in at the $60,000 that it was issued for, less the 1,500. And then the amount attributed to the common stock is simply the $10 par value times the number of shares issued. And so the paid-in capital is less than it would be without those organization costs. So it's similar to what we would do for transaction fees when we're buying and selling securities. And there's no separate accounts for any of these transactions fees. This is the stock issue costs are just regarded as a transaction fee, and they simply reduce the proceeds, no separate accounts involved. Okay, so I think that gets us through this particular section.